The African National Congress has described the Democratic Alliance's court challenge against Employment Equity Amendment Act as anti-transformative. The DA launched the court action against the Minister of Employment and Labour, Nomakhosazana Meth, on International Workers' Day. The party, which is a major stakeholder in the Government of National Unity, says Section 15A of the Employment Equity Amendment Act introduces rigid national race quotas in the workplace. However, the ANC is of the view that through this court action, their fellow GNU member does not want to see transformation. The ANC has pledged to strongly oppose the DA's legal challenge to Section 15A of the Employment Equity Amendment Act, accusing the DA of opposing transformation. The DA claims the Act promotes racial exclusion, not genuine redress, and says the case is about protecting constitutional rights. The court challenge comes as GNU parties prepare to renegotiate their working terms. An expert has weighed in on the matter, and the case is set to be heard on May 6th. Now, to talk more about this, we're now joined by DA MP and spokesperson on employment and labour, Michael Bagraim. Michael, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Now, this court challenge of the Employment Equity Amendment Act has received mixed reviews. I'm sure you're well aware of the position of the unions on this matter. They've been very critical of this move, including your GNU partner, the ANC, which has said this reveals your true colours as being anti-transformation. Just talk to us about this court challenge and the aspects of the new regulations that are of concern to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on air. And we're certainly not anti-transformation. We're looking quite carefully at how do we get the redress of the wrongs of the past. And it's something that we need to move on, because we've had almost 25 years of employment equity and it's gone worse. Now, you can't tell me that you take exactly the same tool, you try and sharpen it a little bit, and you want to have a different result for the experiment. That's a sign of madness. The reality is social engineering in the business community is not working. We need to find other tools. We need to find another way to ensure that we have proper redress for the wrongs of the past. It's still not working. It hasn't worked, and we've got a problem. Now, the issue is if you get a blunt tool like Section 15A where you set quotas, there's no science to the quotas. It doesn't take local situation into account. And then we're introducing a race register all over again, because we're getting forms sent to all the employees saying, you've got to identify as black, coloured, Indian, white, male, female. What happens if Michael Bagraim identifies as black? Are you going to tell me I'm a liar and put me into some sort of race register? It's going back to what we saw under apartheid. And it didn't work. It's a real problem. We need to actually take something different. We need to deregulate, especially the small business community, and we need to create jobs. The economy is shrinking.
I want us to expand on some of those alternatives that you have. But firstly, what of those who say the department is correct and must remedy what should be viewed by all as an anomaly? Because their 2024 Employment Equity Report found that despite comprising just 7.3% of the population, white workers held 62.1% of all top management positions. Surely that would unsettle many who would then push the minister to be deliberate and rejig the system through the quotas.
Well, the point is you need to reject the system, not through quotas. You need to actually look at a different system. What we've got now is a system that has not worked. It's an old anomaly where you take something, it doesn't work, so what you do is you try and make it more harsh. It's not going to work. It definitely won't. What the business community is doing is it's
But if you sharpen a knife, it probably could cut better, wouldn't it?
Well, it'll cut down the employment in South Africa, yes, certainly, and we'll have people then outsourcing, computerizing, and we've seen that around the world as well. What we want is we want to actually enhance the small business sector. The only way you're going to do it is to deregulate, not regulate even more. We saw the late Tito Mboweni at the time, when he was the Minister of Finance, he was also a Minister of Labour, said that if you deregulate the small business community, it will immediately, that was then, he said, it will immediately employ 2 million people.
So
I work as a labour lawyer on this, and I know that's the way it's working.
So are you saying, because many could say they had all the liberties now, but they still chose to have some sort of an anomaly here where 7.3% of the white population occupy 62% of top managerial posts? You're saying that it was the regulations that led to that kind of an anomaly, and that now if you move away from regulations and give them more liberties as the business community, then they'll do right and actually consider fair employment here in this instance?
I'm not saying it's the regulations that led to that anomaly. What I'm saying is the system that led to that anomaly. We need to train, we need to educate, we need technical colleges. We need to move people through the ranks, not by forcing, because then it stops growing. And that's what we've seen with our economy. We need to grow our economy. We need to take into account the diversity. I don't know of any individual, and I've been practicing in labor law now for 40 years, who's come to me and said, I didn't get my job because I'm black.
But universities are churning out a lot of graduates daily. Black people are graduating in numbers from very prominent universities. So if we're saying we need to skill, what are these universities doing?
Well, tell me which individual. Let someone come forward and say, I didn't get the job, I didn't get a promotion because I'm black. We've got laws that say that you can't have that discrimination. What we need to do is we need to encourage the business community to move the diversity upwards. We can't do it by tying the hands behind the back of the business community. It's not going to work. It hasn't worked. You're telling me we've had 25 years of employment equity where you could actually take people to court, and yet it's getting worse. We have now 42% unemployment in this country. When the economy is not growing, you can't expect people to now retrench white management and push people upwards. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. And so what we're finding is that people will rather import their clothing, for instance, instead of manufacturing in South Africa. It doesn't make sense. We want to build the business community. The experiment that you've shown with employment equity in South Africa has not worked. We can't keep taking that same experiment and trying to make it more and more harsh. What you're really doing is you're implementing social engineering, which the nationalist government did. And that didn't work. It fell, it collapsed.
But what of those that would still look at those figures and say, here, you've got a private sector that didn't operate in good faith. They cannot say that of the majority who are black, there were really not that many managers that could have emerged. Many of the graduates couldn't have emerged, where you have a majority, 62.1%, then coming from a population of 7.3% of the white community. What of those who just say, based on just the stats alone, it seems that the business community, with all the liberties, did not operate in good faith here, where they disregarded fair opportunity or equal opportunity?
I don't believe that, because, like I said, let's look at the let's look at the examples that you have. And yes, you've got the numbers out there, and yes, that does reflect it, and it's not right. And we should find a way to actually correct that and reflect the demographics. But we found a way that is making it worse. Now you're telling me those figures. If you told me those figures 10 years ago, it was probably not as bad. So why has employment equity failed us so badly? It wasn't just open season at that point. It was employment equity. No, not one business wanted to have no equity improvement. They wanted to improve their equity, and they were improving their equity. But now what we're seeing is they're just going to make it more harsh. The experiment has not worked. It's been 25 years of employment equity legislation, and every year unemployment gets bigger. Every year we see the stats coming out, and we've got people standing on the street with graduation certificates. It hasn't worked. Find something different. We have to look at it more carefully. And it was a genius like Tito Mboweni that came up and said, if you leave the business community and unregulate to a large degree, we'll find more and more employment. And we're all living in Ship South Africa. No one wants to say, well, I'm not taking that person in because they're disabled. That's not true. Government itself said that we're setting a target, this was 10 years ago, set a target of 3% of employment in disabled. They're the biggest employer in the country. They never reached even 1%. Why is that? Were they discriminating against the disabled community? No, I don't think so. I think what they were doing is trying their utmost to get in more of the disabled community, but somehow the system wasn't regulated too much that it landed up with only less than 1% working for government. How do we explain that? How do we explain the 42% unemployment? Our youth are at 70% unemployment, and it's getting worse. We're very, very close to saying that it's very similar to an Arab Spring, where people will not accept this anymore.
Michael, thank you very much for your time. I suppose we'll see this play out now in court come the 6th of May. Thank you yet again. That's DA MP and spokesperson on employment and labour, Michael Bagraim, speaking to us there.